One thing many Russians like to poke fun at is the ridiculous old laws the US still has on the books. In Quitman, Georgia, for example, it's illegal for chickens to cross the road. The goal was to keep domestic birds out of traffic. Now people roll their eyes and laugh at it. But modern Russia has its own crazy laws, only they are not about chicken. They are about your body, your kids, your job, and your passport. They don't make people laugh. They make people shut up. I'm Elvira Bary, a writer born in the Soviet Union. And tonight we are going to dissect a truth most people outside Russia never see. The Kremlin doesn't need a perfect dictatorship. It needs a legal minefield so unpredictable, so absurd, so deliberately vague that millions live in fear of stepping on the wrong square. And here's the roadmap we'll follow together, the anatomy of control. Policing love and family, why the state climbs into bedrooms, identity, and motherhood. Owning your career, how doctors, policemen, and scientists are trapped by invisible chains. Criminalizing thoughts, when a meme, a map, or a rainbow becomes a crime. Any protest is treason. How a paper cup turns into extremism. Citizenship for mercenaries. Why the Kremlin now trades passports for blood. People as the new oil. How citizens are squeezed to replace collapsing energy revenue. The Eternal President Project. How a constitution was rewritten for one man's immortality. If independent analysis matters to you, if you want these topics discussed without fear, without permission, like, subscribe, share, or join my think tank. Your support via PayPal or SuperThanks literally keeps this work alive. Let's begin. Policing love and family relationships. There's one place the government should never go, into your private life. And in Russia, that's exactly where it goes. The first step was the so-called Dima Yakovlev law, or the law of scoundrels. It was enforced in 2012 in revenge for the US Magnitsky sanctions and banned Americans from adopting Russian orphans, real children, including kids with serious medical conditions who had already met their future families, became bargaining chips. On paper, it's about protecting kids. In practice, it's punishing American families and Russian orphans for the Kremlin's own wrongdoings. 10 years later, the same logic was turned against sexual minorities. Russia took its 2013 law on protecting minors from gay propaganda and expanded it to all ages. Now, any positive or even neutral portrayal of LGBT people in films, books, ads, or social media can be punished. Courts have fined streaming services, publishers, and even Apple for propaganda because they host content with same-sex romance or just rainbow imagery. Next year, Parliament went further and banned almost all gender-affirming medical care and legal gender change. The new law blocks surgeries and hormones, prohibits changing documents, and even restricts the family rights of trans people. For thousands of citizens, the state has simply erased the legal option to exist as themselves. Then the Supreme Court labeled the international LGBT movement an extremist organization. After that decision, people have started getting fines and short jail terms just for rainbow-colored items on clothes, bags, or jewelry. Police and security services literally hunt for rainbow symbols on social networks and in windows. By 2024, it wasn't enough to punish who you sleep with and how you identify. The state moved directly into your womb. A new law bans propaganda of a child-free lifestyle in media, advertising, films, and online. Anything that looks like a conscious rejection of having children can bring heavy fines up to 5 million rubles for companies. The authors openly say this is about birth rates and about fighting Western influence. Putin signed another law. Citizens from countries where gender transition is illegal can no longer adopt Russian children. On top of the old Dima Yakovlev ban for Americans, this cuts off at least 15 more countries. Again, the justification is saving children from imaginary gender-affirming surgeries abroad. The real result is simple: fewer kids leave orphanages, and the Kremlin boasts another symbolic punch at the evil West. Owning your career. The easiest way to control the population is to lock their career to the state so tightly that any disobedience threatens their whole future. The most obvious example is those working for the government. In 2019, Putin signed a law that even fired FSB agents cannot leave the country for 5 years. In 2024, Reuters wrote that staff of the State Duma are effectively banned from any foreign travel at all, even to friendly countries. Requests are rejected by default. Scientists have it even worse. Over the last few years, Russian physicists working on hypersonic technology have been arrested one after another. In May 2024, a 77-year-old scientist, Anatoly Maslov, was sentenced to 14 years for treason. Colleagues insist his research was based on open sources and conference papers. Another hypersonic researcher, Alexander Kuranov, got 7 years. In Crimea, a 70-year-old Ukrainian biologist Leonid Pshenichnov was arrested for treason because he supported international limits on Antarctic krill fishing that Russia didn't like. At the same time, lawmakers quietly expand the definition of treason and espionage to cover people with no access to real state secrets, and raised the maximum penalty for treason to life in prison. If you are a scientist whose work touches anything sensitive, weapons, space, climate, fisheries, then any contact with foreign colleagues can suddenly be painted as helping hostile organizations. The state is also tightening its grip on healthcare workers. In November 2025, Putin signed a law that forces young doctors who study on state-funded residencies to sign binding contracts. After graduation, they must work for several years in specific clinics, usually in poor regions. If they refuse, they have to pay back the value of their training. Some Russian medical graduates are being sent for 3-year mandatory service in the occupied territories of Ukraine, with refusal punishable by sanctions. Formally, this is strengthening healthcare in the regions. In practice, it is conscription in a white coat. Criminalizing thoughts. Once a person's career is chained to the state, the next step is to reach into their mind. Modern Russia has written entire chapters of the criminal code defining what you are allowed to think out loud. The centerpiece is the 2022 wartime censorship package. In March of that year, the Duma created new crimes: spreading fake news about the army, discrediting the armed forces, or calling for sanctions. The penalties reach up to 15 years in prison. Since then, thousands had been fined or jailed for even the mildest anti-war statements. Right now, I'm writing a historical novel about the war in Ukraine, the Snow Queen's Spring, and I regularly share my thoughts and research on Facebook and Instagram. If I were still living in Russia, those posts alone would guarantee me a trial and a long prison sentence, even though I'm still in the middle of writing and haven't finished the manuscript yet. If you are curious about the process, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram or subscribe to my newsletter. The link is in the description. One lawyer, Dmitry Talantov, got 7 years for Facebook posts condemning the invasion. A Moscow municipal deputy, Alexei Gorinov, is serving more than 10 years for talking about civilian deaths. He was accused of justifying terrorism. An artist, Alexandra Skochalenko, received 7 years for replacing supermarket price tags with small anti-war messages. In 2024, Parliament added a new twist. Courts can now confiscate the property of anyone convicted of fakes or discrediting the army. Your apartment, savings, car can be seized and sold. Next layer is foreign agents. The original 2012 law targeted NGOs with foreign funding. But in 2022, the rules changed completely. Now, you do not have to receive any money from abroad. It is enough that the state declares you under foreign influence, a phrase that covers almost any kind of contact, support, or even conversation with a foreign source. There is a main register of foreign agents and a secondary register of affiliated persons. Once you are on these lists, every publication must carry a humiliating label. Your finances are monitored, your work is restricted, and many people are afraid to deal with you at all. On top of that, the state rewrote the rules of reality itself. In 2023, the government backed an amendment that classifies as extremist materials any maps or images that dispute the territorial integrity of Russia. If your textbook shows Crimea as Ukrainian, legally it's in the same basket as Nazi propaganda. Another set of laws protects historical truth about World War II, banning comparisons between Soviet and Nazi crimes and punishing any denial of the decisive role of the Soviet people. Religion is folded into the same package. Since 2013, Article 148 of the Criminal Code makes insulting the religious feelings of believers a criminal offense. People have been persecuted for memes, jokes, and theater performances. The goal is not to protect faith. It is to give the authorities yet another vague lever over artists, bloggers, and anyone who uses humor. Finally, the regime moved from punishing speech to punishing curiosity. In 2025, Putin signed a law that fines people for intentionally searching for extremist content online, even via VPNs. Russia already has a huge list of extremist materials. Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation, the International LGBT Movement, even Facebook and Instagram. Now, just trying to read anything about this can make you a suspect. Any protest is treason. A healthy legal system draws a clear line. Peaceful protest is legal. Violence and coups are not. In Russia, that line has been blurred on purpose. Any attempt to resist power slides step by step from disrespect to extremism to treason. The first step was to criminalize rudeness. In 2019, Parliament passed a law against online disrespect of the state, its symbols and officials, including the president. Courts can fine people and jail them for up to 15 days for posts that insult the authorities. In practice, it means you can be punished for a rude meme about Putin or swear word about the police. At the same time, the rules on public gatherings were tightened again. New amendments raised fines into hundreds of thousands of rubles and allowed up to 20 days of arrest for joining an unauthorized rally. The authorities often simply refuse permits for opposition rallies, then arrest people for protesting without permission. This is a trap by design. When protests still happen, the criminal code is used like a club. That happened in 2019 during the Moscow demonstrations over opposition candidates blocked from elections. Several young people were charged with violence against a representative of authority for actions that would be treated as minor scuffles in another country. One of them, Sergei Abanichev, spent almost a month in jail for allegedly throwing a paper cup toward a riot policeman before investigators finally dropped the charges. On top of that sits the separatism toolkit. Article 280.1 punishes public calls to violate Russia's territorial integrity with up to 4 years in prison. In theory, it's about stopping people from carving up the country. In practice, it has been used against activists who question the annexation of Crimea or discuss more autonomy for regions. Combine this with the new rule that wrong maps are extremist, and even talking about borders becomes risky. Above all this, the treason laws have been blown open. In 2023, Russia allowed life imprisonment for treason. Next year, lawmakers moved to expand treason to include vague affiliation with organizations acting against Russia's security, a definition that can easily cover NGOs, media, or foreign universities. Another law punishes cooperation with international courts and tribunals, including the International Criminal Court, with up to 5 years in prison. If you help investigate war crimes by Russian officials, the state labels you a traitor. Citizenship for mercenaries. When a normal state gives you a passport, it is saying you belong here and we protect you. When today's Russia gives you a passport, the message is different. You belong to us and you owe us. The first experiment was with occupied territories. From 2019 onwards, Moscow kept simplifying Russian citizenship for people in Crimea, Donetsk, Lugansk, later Kherson and Zaporizhia. By 2022, residents of any part of Ukraine under Russian control could apply through a fast-track scheme. No 5-year residence, no proof of income, just fill out a form at the local Interior Ministry office. Then the carrot turned into a stick. A 2025 decree told Ukrainians living without legal grounds on Russian territory, including annexed regions, to regulate their status or leave by a deadline. Kyiv calls this forced displacement and plans to show it to the International Criminal Court as another war crime. In some places, utility tariffs were raised by double digits and subsidies were offered only to those with Russian passports. If you want to heat your apartment or keep your pension, you have to change your citizenship. In parallel, the Kremlin turned citizenship into a recruiting bonus for war. Foreign nationals can get a Russian passport if they sign a contract with the army. No need to go through the normal procedure. The latest step is even more telling. A government commission has backed amendments that prohibit the extradition of foreign citizens and stateless persons who serve or have served under contract in the Russian armed forces, including those who fought in Ukraine. If they are wanted or convicted abroad, Russia promises not to hand them over. Combine this with another rule: Russian citizens cannot be extradited at all, and you get a clear offer: come fight for us. And we will try to wash away your past problems with a red passport. Of course, Moscow is not doing this out of love for foreigners. The ideal scenario for the Kremlin is simple and cynical. You attract desperate men from poor countries, from failed careers, from criminal backgrounds. You send them to the front, where many will be killed, so you don't have to give them anything. Those who survive bring combat skills, trauma, and sometimes a criminal record into Russian society, but now with a legal shield. People as new oil. For years, the Russian budget lived off oil and gas. Now that money is under pressure from sanctions and low prices. The Kremlin's answer is brutal. If oil flows bring in less cash, your wallet will bring in more. Start with fines. In 2024, traffic fines alone brought in more than 176 billion rubles. The government now wants to increase many of these penalties by around 50%, including the most common one, speeding. In practice, it is a parallel tax system where inspectors and cameras mine money from drivers for the federal center. Then come classic taxes. In the past 2 years, the government approved and prepared a whole package of hikes, raising VAT from 20 to 22%, cutting the VAT exemption threshold for small businesses, pushing up corporate and high-income tax rates. Officials openly say this will bring at least an extra trillion rubles into the budget to fund war and close the deficit. Business groups warn that 1 in 10 small firms could be forced to shut down or go into the shadow economy. At the same time, the Kremlin keeps using trade bans as a political hammer, regardless of who gets crushed underneath. After a Russian jet was shut down in 2015, Moscow banned imports of many Turkish food products, including tomatoes. When relations improved, the ban was lifted and a tomato thaw was celebrated in the press. Behind those headlines are real businesses that suddenly lose their supply chains because one man is angry, then get them back when he decides to forgive. Moscow has begun systematically cutting mobile internet and blocking foreign websites under the pretext of preventing drone attacks. For small businesses and ordinary people, this is devastating. Taxi drivers, delivery couriers, truckers, shop owners, and freelancers all depend on stable mobile internet for payments, navigation, orders, and communication. When the signal disappears, their income disappears with it. In reality, this isn't about drones. It's about tightening control. And ordinary people are the ones paying the price. The Eternal President Project. All these crazy laws have one center of gravity. They make perfect sense if you understand that this system has one main task: keep one man and his clan in power as long as possible. In a real democracy, the constitution is the wall that even presidents cannot move. In Russia, Putin took a sledgehammer to that wall. In 2020, he pushed through a constitutional reform and a nationwide vote that, among other things, reset his previous terms to 0. Then, in 2021, he signed the implementing law that allows him to run for 2 more 6-year terms, potentially staying in power until 2036. At the same time, another law gave ex-presidents lifetime immunity and an automatic seat in the Federation Council. Once you are president, you and your family are shielded for life from criminal and administrative prosecution for anything you have done, not just in office, but during your entire lifetime. You can only theoretically lose this immunity if both houses of parliament and the highest courts suddenly agree to turn on you. In a system built on loyalty and fear, that is as realistic as a place coup announced in the evening news. If Putin leaves, he technically has a legal parachute, but he also knows what happens to fallen rulers in his country. He has seen what Russian courts can do to enemies of the people when they get a signal from above. So he has to assume that if he ever truly loses control, his own laws will not save him. For him and for his circle, power is not a nice to have anymore. It is a matter of personal survival. Now, look at how the rest of the legal system is built around this fear. Russia has one of the highest densities of extremism and fake news laws in the world. International watchdogs note that vague articles give the authorities great discretion to punish absolutely any speech or activity. This vagueness is not a bug, it's a feature. If the law clearly said you go to jail for X, people would just avoid X. But when fake news, discrediting, insulting feelings, justifying extremism, and offending traditional values are left undefined, every citizen lives under a floating sword. I want to ask you something personal and answer honestly in the comments. If your government passed laws that collided with your core values, what would you do? Would you comply to stay safe? Would you resist? Would you leave? Or would you try to adapt and survive inside the system? Your stories matter, not just to me, but to everyone here who reads them. And if you want more deep dives like this one, work that dissects the machinery of power with honesty and without fear, consider supporting this channel. You can join the think tank, leave a super thanks, or support via PayPal. That support is what allows me to keep reading these laws so you don't have to. Thank you for being here. Stay curious, stay brave, and take care of yourselves, wherever in the world you are.